So what's this session for? What this session doesn't do, this session is not going to give you in-depth guidance on election law. I'm not a lawyer and I don't want to get sued. What it will do is just give you some basic guidance. It won't give you definitive answers to how all counts are run, because local accounts vary from local authority to local authority. So always contact your electoral services team in your area to ask how they are running their count, and do that ahead of time before you actually get to the count stage. They will give you all the information you need to know. The aims and objectives are to understand what an effective count operation looks like and why it's important, to understand the roles of the professional counting staff, understand the roles of the party volunteers at the count, gain familiarity with the roles of party volunteers at the count, and the two stages of the count, the verification and the count proper, and understand the political importance of them. And to learn why box counts are so vital and how to capture the data and understanding its importance to future campaigns. By the end of this session, you'll feel more confident about the count, its operation, and the role of the Green Party agents and counting agents. No count staff can be challenged and have the confidence to do so. Have the skills to ensure ballots are accurately counted, understand how split ballots are counted, are recorded, and ensure that they're correctly tabulated, and understand guidance in relation to spoil and doubtful ballots and recounts. So if we have a look at the count more generally, right? I'm going to give you my first top tip. I've done a few counts, and my top tip here is there's actually a document, and I would suggest that you actually share this. You actually keep this document, open it on your laptop, try and save it, pin it, anything you can. And this is the guidance which the Electoral Commission gives to returning officers, and it says in there exactly what the returning officer has to do in terms of their responsibilities. So it will tell you every stage of the count. It goes through really, really clearly. In fact, if you read that document, you probably don't need to come to the training. So if you want to scoot off now, you can. But it's a really, really good document, and you'll get a lot of information in there. And underneath it, I've just shared, there's a Green Party guidance as well that's been done on verification. So there is a guide there that's available from the Green Party just below. One thing I did want to find out and just get a feel for, is there anybody who hasn't been to a count before who maybe wants me to describe what the environment is a bit more? Because it's really hard for me to know what the mix here. So if is anyone identifying in chat that they have not been to a count and wants me to go into what it will look like inside?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've got one straight away, Sharron.
Brilliant. So just to give you an idea, this is just some pictures of what a count can look like. As I said, every count will be laid out differently, and some counts will just be counting for one election. You may have some venues that are counting multiple elections, because you've got parish, you've got ward councillors, you've got a whole range. So they will vary, and do check locally. You can expect, so if you're in a borough or an area, a party that is contesting local elections, you can expect each ward to have a couple of tables, and they will be clearly marked which ward that is, and there will be counting staff behind those desks and a supervisor who may be overlooking a couple of wards. They can be laid out, as you can see. These are just some pictures in like a really horseshoe shape. You'll have the counting staff at one side sat down. Then on the other side, you'll have all the counting agents for all the other parties jostling to get into position to make sure they can see what's going on. It really can become a bit of a free for all. It's going to be a bit, with COVID restrictions, it's going to be a bit different this time. But generally, counts are all about getting yourself into the right position, and remembering you've got just as much right to be right in front of those votes as the Labour agent has, as the Conservative agent. We've got as much right to be there as they have. Just go through the stages of the count with you. So we start with the verification. The verification is where they open the ballot boxes, and the point of the verification is to make sure that the number of ballots in those boxes matches the figure given at polling stations for the number of ballots issued, because what they want is those two to match. They will agree a slight variance sometimes, like might say, if we can't find one, that's okay. But at that stage, that's what the verification is officially for. They then move after verification and everyone's satisfied that the number of votes actually ballots are turned up at the count are the same as the number of ballots issued. They move on to the ballot counting. We call that the count proper. And then potentially you'll get verbal declarations, potential recounts, more verbal declarations if there is a recount. Then you will move on to formal declaration. Now, the formal declaration, once they give a formal declaration, you cannot get that result changed. It's too late. So if you're not happy or satisfied about anything, you need to raise it at the verbal declaration point. That is your opportunity to raise it. By law, they have to give you enough time, agents enough time, to be fully satisfied and look at the figures and make sure they're comfortable and accurate. But if you've gone through the verification stage and then gone through the ballot count, generally you'll have a good idea what the turnout is and be happy with the figures that they're giving you. But as I said, the verbal declaration is at that point, that's your only time to challenge. Here's some roles of people that you'll see at the count. So for the local authority, you'll have the returning officer, you'll have the deputy returning officer quite usually. They're usually the ones that are technically running it. Then you've got the count station supervisor. They're a really important key person within the count because they will be looking after a number of counting staff who are actually counting the ballots and folding the ballots. And it's a supervisor that you'll have most relationship with on the day. You'll have the agent there from political parties. You'll have counting agents, candidates, and candidates are allowed guests. You'll also see press there sometimes. Returning officers are supposed to provide information about who's at the count and who is liaising with political parties. They're supposed to give you that in writing at the start of the count or even before if they can. And you have a right to request that information. So more general information, the verification stage normally starts 10 o'clock prompt as soon as polls close. So ensure your counting agents and guests are there on time. Some counts can take place on the day after, so check with electoral services. Room arrangements vary, as we said, but you can expect to see each ward to have its own station consisting of a number of tables, and some counts will have refreshments away from the main counting hall. Treat all the information, this is really important, treat all the information in the counting hall as confidential until the official declaration. Your activists, your counting agents should not be tweeting from the hall. Generally, returning officers will issue guidance to you about whether mobile phones can be used at all in the counting hall. And I would say it's a good idea just to brief all of your counting agents to say, look, don't be tweeting. Until they declare it, it is confidential. So what is the count and what it isn't, and why is it so important? So a lot of people go to the count thinking it's a bit of a jolly, but it's not. It's not a social event. It's not a reward for activists, and it's not an opportunity to mix with colleagues from other parties or the media and have a bit of a gossip. It's a crucial part of winning elections, and you should see it as the end stage of the election. The election doesn't end at close of polls. The election ends once we've got the declaration and you've gone through the count. It provides us intelligence for future targeting for wards. It prevents miscounting. It maximises the Green Party vote. I would say make sure all your guests and agents are well briefed and are rehearsed, and go through a practice session with them, like the practical that we're going to do in a few minutes. So before the count, so before you even get to the count, the stuff that you need to do, you're going to have to select your counting agents and your candidate guests. I'll go through in a minute about who I feel the best people to be your counting agents. Electoral services will give you a deadline for providing your list of counting agents. It's normally it'd be around the 28th of April. 28th of April is the last legal date. So do check with your electoral services team about what the date is for returning your list of counting agents. You cannot submit names after the deadline because it's illegal. So if you miss the deadline, sorry, you're not taking anyone. Only the candidate and the agent will be able to go. If you can, submit reserve counting agents. If other candidates don't use their full allocation of counting agents, often, not always, often they will divide the remaining slots between the other parties. And then, so if you submit reserves, it stops the bigger parties getting twice as many people at the count than you do. So share with what you've learned here tonight with your count teams, run a practice verification session if you can, and use an actual mock-up, use the mock-up of your ballot paper if you can do that. Familiarise yourself with the polling district codes and the order and the names on the ballot papers, again, if you can do that. It will make it a lot easier. Prepare your tally sheets in advance. I've given a link of some tally sheets, so perhaps we could share that in the chat just to give you some example of what they could look like. They can even be a generic one that you give to each ward, or one of my top tips is tailor your tally sheets so the parties are on the same order as the ballot sheet, as the ballot paper on your target wards. So each ward will have a different tally. It just makes it quicker when you're ticking off and keeping a tally if it's all in the same order as the ballot paper is. Email all your counting agents the day before, remind them what time to arrive, and bring ID. They will have to bring ID with them. It's usually a passport. Prepare a clipboard for each counting agent, including their tally sheets, a list of candidates and the emblems in case they're not familiar with them, and the order that they appear in the ballot paper if you can, and a list of polling districts and a plan of the counting hall if you've been provided that by electoral services already. If you don't get provided it early, they have to give everybody a plan when you arrive at the count. And of course, everyone should bring a pen and COVID-based things like face masks. So who should be at the count? So, and really the most important bit is, who do you choose to be counting agents? Getting that right is the most important part of this. You need people that are competent. You need your A team there. So you really, when you're looking at counting agents, you want people that have good focus, attention to detail, that can concentrate and also to remain calm. Your candidate's there already, but if you're in a target ward, and they often can be a bit nervous, not always, but can, they don't always make the best counting agents. So I wouldn't rely necessarily on a candidate to do it. The candidate's guest is really important at the moment because so few slots are being given to counting agents due to COVID restrictions. So I would insist with candidates that their guest is someone that can be used as a counting agent. So again, someone that's going to be very calm, someone that's got good focus and attention to detail, and of course the agent. But if the agent's got several elections, your job will be to direct volunteers to the right tables to make sure your key target wards and key polling districts are being covered, and also to make sure that any challenges are being made properly with the electoral services people and returning officers. And then, as we said, the wonderful counting agents. Choose your most experienced people. I try to have a mixture of 70% experience and a few new people that we think they're going to do a good job, so that you can start training them. But the majority should be experienced, should know what they're doing, and be really, as I say, calm with good attention to detail. So what are counting agents' rights and responsibilities? Well, first of all, you are there to insist all ballots are unfolded. Your rights are to make sure that all ballots are unfolded and placed on the table face up. That is a legal requirement. If they're not putting them face up, you have to challenge them. You say, no, excuse me, can you make that face up? If the counting staff don't listen, report it straight up to the supervisor, and then if it's necessary, the returning officer, because that is a legal requirement that all ballots are face up, not face down. This process has got to be carried out at speed, which allows you to see the ballot paper and be comfortable. So again, if they go too fast, if they're rushing through, you can say, can you slow down, please? That's too fast. I can't see. Because you need to be certain that everything's happening in a transparent way. And at this stage of the verification, you will be taking a tally of votes. As each ballot is unfolded, indicate all votes on the tally sheet. With multiple candidates, tally each vote on a piece of paper. So if you've got 3 candidates, put all 3 votes down. I would aim to take at least one sample of 50 to 100 votes. And if you can, take 2 from each ballot box if that's possible. The really important thing, and this is why getting the right people there is important, you've got to resist the temptation to be too optimistic when counting your own votes. Trust me, it does happen. So you want someone that's going to be really honest about yourself. You almost have to be dispassionate and disconnect yourself politically, because you want an accurate count of where everybody's votes are, not just yours, Labour. How that ward has voted is so important, that split. At the count, the counting agents obviously have lots of rules. You can't lean over the table. You can't intimidate counting staff that way. You can't place your hands on the counting table. You must not touch ballots. That is illegal. So as tempting as it is to move one, if you see it go in the wrong place, you can't. You have to get the counting staff to do that. For other things to note, only agents can request a recount. Only agents can agree doubtful ballots. That's where people haven't indicated properly what their party is or have drawn on them. And only agents can agree they're happy with the totals of the verification. COVID is obviously going to play a big role, and there's quite a few changes this year and accommodations. The main thing to be aware of is local returning officers have been given full discretion to resolve any conflicts between election law and COVID health and safety restrictions. And they've been given that, and that is quite dangerous for us for many reasons. It's really quite problematic. So they can limit the number of people around. They could turn around and limit the number of people around one table if they think it's dangerous. They can try and speed the count up because they want their staff out quickly. They can slow it down if they want to break up their staff in between. What I would say, if something happens at a count that is not in line with election law and the returning officer is using COVID restrictions to either speed up a ballot, speed up a count to get everyone home early or anything like that, please log it and share it with the field team, because we may need to challenge it, particularly anywhere where it's a close count, a close election for us. We need to know that, because we could legally challenge if you thought it was important enough. We think it's going to make that much of a difference. But the main things I would look out for is them trying to get the count over and done with really quickly, not giving agents enough time to be confident with the verbal declaration and those kind of things. As always at the moment, please wear a mask in the counting hall and bring your hand sanitizer, as we've already said. So that's the main things you can expect in terms of COVID. So let's move on. So why do we think verification stage is important? Anyone got anything they know? Yep. Hi, Andy.
Yeah, it's the only time that the ballots are sorted by polling district, so it's the only opportunity to see them in sort of that granular detail where the votes come from.
Yeah, precisely, Andy. It's important because they give us what we call box counts. Now, box counts are samples of actual votes cast taken in individual ballot boxes, and the ballot boxes are aligned to polling districts. And so each polling district will have its own ballot box, in some cases two, and this will give us very useful data. It's our opportunity to discover the share of the vote cast in each polling district, both for us and our rivals. So we can track our rivals' votes. We know which parts of a ward is strong for them or strong for us. It's important in terms of that data. It helps us to target our resources better in the future and fight better elections, basically. And there are also other reasons for doing it. Sometimes if you have an experimental campaign, you might want to run two different messages in your literature, and then at the end of it, evaluate which ones worked best. You can compare polling data from each polling district and say, oh, well, that messaging would appear to have worked better because our vote share was massive and it was lower here. So people can use it for those experimental terms as well. So things to watch out for in verification: counting staff going too quickly, as we've already mentioned; counting staff placing ballots face down, as we already said, big no-no. If something is wrong, you should politely but firmly ask the counting staff to slow down or turn it up. So it would just be, excuse me, that was far too quick. Can I ask you to slow down a little bit? I cannot view the ballot paper. Can I ask that? I'm sorry, I noticed those are face down. Can you please turn them all the right way up? You were counting it into a bundle. I think it was 20, but I think you got that short. Could you recount that? Could you recount that bundle, that pile? You can ask all of those if you have reason to believe that they're not doing it properly, and you should. That's what you're there for. You are there to make sure that you have transparency. If they refuse, ask the supervisor and even the returning officer, and keep a log if your request for a lawful and transparent count is not actioned. So I'm just going to go through a timeline of what happens in the count and what we would be doing at each stage. So this is the first count. This is what the top section is what the counting staff are doing. The bottom line is what we want our counting agents to be doing at that time. So they come along, they take the ballot box, they will open the seal in front of the counting agents. That has to happen, by the way. If they don't, then you've got a problem. They will then empty the ballot box onto the desk. They shouldn't do it they shouldn't tip it out. Ballots shouldn't hit the floor. That again is a big no-no. And they'll empty it onto the desk. So at that point in time, your counting agent should be checking the ballot box number, making a note of it on the tally sheet, and wait for them to start turning over. Then, so the next point is where they will open up the ballots and they will put them face up on the table. This is the point where you want to be taking tallies of the candidates and the votes. They normally, I would take, as I said, try and take a sample of 50 from each ballot box, 50 to 100 per ballot box. If you can get 2 sets, even better. It will give you a more accurate indication of what the votes are. Once they're all turned up, once they're all opened and facing upwards, they'll start counting the ballots into batches. The actual number in a batch will vary from count to count, but you can expect it to be 25, 50, 100. They should tell you if you ask. And then at that point, you need to take a sample. If you can, just try and do a sense check when they're flicking through and counting the numbers. You might be able to see a couple of the candidates and just use that as a sense check against the tally that you've already done. That bit's a bit harder. Don't worry if you can't do that bit. Once they've done that, they return all of the votes back into the box for later, for mixing in the count stage. At that point, your job is done on that table. Go somewhere else. And then they'll take the information, compare the number of votes given out at the polling station with the number of votes that have come through the ballot boxes, and that figure will have to match. They can agree a small variance, but generally it has to match. As I said, do challenge if they're doing it too quickly so that you can't see, or if they count face down. And then, so as we said, that's how the turnout figure is then agreed from verifying all of the different wards. That will give you the total verification. So shall we have a little practice? Yeah? Right, this is all a bit experimental, so bear with me. I'm going to switch cameras. Have I lost anyone, by the way? Is it all making sense?
Got a few questions. I don't know if you want to do them now, Sharron, or
we can, if it'll help for
on.
the next, as we do the practical. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Just tick a few off. So there, some of them are a bit more general, but I guess they need addressing. So first question is, one party's election agent is sadly refusing to go to the count. Can another party officer cover?
They will need to nominate a sub-agent. So they will need to write to electoral services and say, I am nominating Joe or Joanna Bloggs to be my sub-agent, and they can act for them.
Great, thank you. So next one, I'm an election agent for part of the district council area and another agent covers the rest. Do I need to be at the count with my candidate, or can the other agent cover me if necessary?
They can cover you, but they won't be able to. You would have to appoint them again as a sub-agent if you want them to look at your doubtful ballots and do your responsibilities. So you would have to say that you would have to make each of you your sub-agents. But I would say I would go if you can, because every set of eyes at a count is really valuable. Cool.
Okay. Just so you know, we can only see your hand, Sharron.
Oh, that's good. I've swapped cameras.
There
you go. You can see my face again there.
Is there? Do you have any particular info? I guess you're in London, on the GLA count and whether that will be any different to what you've just run through.
Right, so the GLA count is an automated count. They use counting machines, so that will be different, and we will be doing a separate operation for that. But we do have by-elections, and the by-elections are taking place in the same venues as the GLA counts. So I would say if anyone wants to ask any specific questions about the London elections, can we hook up later, because it is all the mayoral elections. I think all of them tend to be electronic counting machines. Certainly the bigger ones are.
Cool. I'll put your email in the chat then, just in case anyone.
Thank you. That's really kind of you, Tom.
There was a question at the start when you were kind of doing the very first bit about where the postal vote opening comes in to that first bit of verification.
Yeah, so I have not really covered postal votes because they are verified earlier, and your head of electoral services will have issued dates when they're opening postal votes. Opening postal votes, what they do is they open the envelope they're in. They then have to scan the signatures and make sure the signature matches the one on their database, and then from that point they unfold them in a similar way as they do for any other one. They don't do any sort of counting. They all get put back in a ballot box for counting at the count. If you've got time, I don't know how useful going to postal vote verifications are. I would say if you've got a large party and you are very keen to know whether you've got the vote share you want, it can give you a good indication. You would expect, usually Conservatives get a high proportion of those votes on postal votes. So if they've got a lower proportion, then you can go, right, well, they're not going to catch up, are they? So, but I would say generally go to one if you want to have a look, but you don't have to go to everyone.
Okay. I think you've answered those two and that one. So just a question that's just come in. So somebody's been told by their election staff, I guess at their council, that verification will be done face down. Should this be challenged now then?
You can't. It's legislation.
Yeah.
Verification has to be face up. Ballot papers have. The reason why they have to be, this is really geeky thing, sorry. The reason why they have to be done face up is because and not people know this, but every ballot paper has got a unique number on the back, and they cannot show that unique number. So that's why they have to be done faced up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess contact your field officer if you really think that that's being proposed. Yeah. Yeah,
and we may need intervention on that one, because that is not in, that, as far as I'm aware, that is illegal.
Yeah, and then last one, if the verification isn't done on Thursday night, if it's done on Friday, how does the party check how secure the ballot boxes are overnight?
So there is provision. Normally, if it's a count the next day, agents are told where the boxes are going to be stored, and you can go and look at them turning up and making sure that they're there, and you can look to see that they're sealed. And as I say, in the verification stage, one of the first things they do is bring it out and open the seal in front of you.
Okay, and then just one from me, the Google Docs link that you had on slide 7, was that the tally sheets link?
No, so there was 2 links. One was the Electoral Commission's guidance on counts for returning officers, and the other one was the party's guidance on counts, I believe. If it's not, then I will make sure I give everybody the link that they need.
Yeah, okay, because I didn't have that one to put into the chat. Thank you.
No problem.
That's it.
All right, so shall we pretend to do some counting now? Can I just say, really cruelly, my family has ordered Chinese and it's turned up and all I can smell is Chinese. So if I get a bit distracted, that's the reason. Right, so you should be able to see an empty desk, yes?
Yeah.
I am now a counting agent. This is my box of ballots, and I'm going to tip it out for you. These are made up ballots, by the way. So here we go. So I am now the counting agent. So, oh God, there's a spider amongst them. I didn't want that. So I'm going to do the job now. So what I would like you to do is raise hand if you see something if you think I'm going too fast, or there's something that should be challenged. Tom will flag it up, and then say why you think it's wrong. Okay. Now, obviously, you would be able to see the whole desk on the actual count day. You wouldn't be looking through my camera.
Okay, stop. I think Jake was just in first.
Hey, come on, Jake.
You're going a bit too fast. Can you slow down, please?
All right.
And I don't know if that was Hillary's point as well.
Hillary, yeah.
Do they have to be all put the same way round?
No.
Oh, okay.
But good spot, though. Thank you. Oh, I see lots of hands.
Sorry, stop. Yeah, Natalie's in first. Oh my goodness, it's gone crazy. Go on, Natalie.
Please, can you put one of the ones you just put down face up? You put it down, face down.
Oh.
Okay. Hillary Bowman.
I think you put 2 down at the same time.
I did, Hillary, and that was very, very naughty of me. You did completely the right thing by stopping me. Now, what I would say is, can you please take them off and put them down individually? And then the counting agent would have to, they would huff and puff, and then they would start putting them down because you're slowing them down because they want to get home for their tea at some point. I hope you're all keeping a nice little tally. Can you see the ticks?
I think it depends what view people have got you on. Stop, Joanne.
Yes.
Joanne.
Hello, yes. I noticed that there were some papers that was void.
There was a doubtful ballot. Now, at this point, I'm really pleased you raised that, John. At this point, they don't remove doubtful ballots. They only move them when they're counting. So they would stay in that pile for now and go back in the ballot box. And then when you do the count, they'll have to take them out. And if they don't, then you go, can you take that out?
Should we tally doubtful ballots?
There's nothing really to tally because you could keep them, you could, and then, you know, I have done that in the past. And then you make sure you give that information to the agent. And then they know, because they'll know how many they have to approve. I'm sorry, my husband's written these. I'm just right. Oh, there you go. That's a nice one. So there we go. I think as many of you can't see the ticks, I don't know if it's a point. I've got like 60 ballots. I don't think we need to go through them all. Unless everybody indicate if you want me to keep going or indicate if you think you've got the idea.
I think anybody that, is there anybody that was raising something that I didn't cover? Because I was trying to lower people's hands when I thought they were done. And Stuart.
I noticed that there are some ticks rather than crosses. Are they still counted as valid votes, please?
Yes, they are. It has to be a clear signal. It should be a cross, but if it's a tick or if it's a star, as long as it's within that box, it's still a legal ballot. And I have had arguments. Well, we've had debates with agents and returning office previously that you know, even when you get, should we say, colourful pictures drawn on ballot papers, we won't go into too much detail, as long as they indicate quite clearly which party it is, you could argue that's your vote. So yeah, it just has to be a clear mark and it has to be within your box. It can't go into anybody else's.
There's a couple of examples in there.
Yeah. So was anybody actually, I don't think anyone really kept a full tally. So has anybody else got any questions about that?
I think Andy's kept a tally.
Oh, have it. I'll keep going for Andy then. And Andy can tell us how many he's got.
I'm keeping a tally.
Danny's on
We're
it as
doing
well.
really well.
Star, Danny. I'm just going to unfold them and we won't do any dirty tricks because I think you've got all of the dirty tricks by now. They will probably go a bit quicker than this, if I'm being honest. Oh, look, that's 2 folded together. That's naughty. you what, I'll make a terrible count staff. I really would. Don't know how they do it all day. I hope you've all seen the lovely candidates' names.
Yeah.
So yeah, ooh, we've got a Delia Smith is standing apparently as an independent. Ed Davies standing. Boris Johnson is.
For people that are, oh yeah, okay.
Go on, Ed.
No, one of the problems is if anybody speaks, which I've just done. But yes, so somebody just said you can pin an individual person.
Not on my iPad.
You can.
Or maybe not everybody can.
Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody can. Oh God.
Sorry, that's my fault. Maybe I should have said that beforehand. I didn't think of it, if I'm being honest. Right. Does anybody want to have a guess at how many there were? Do you want to have a few minutes? Add it up.
A couple of questions whilst people are doing that,
Yep.
Sharon. So how many counters are usually assigned to each polling district? And should a party aim to have somebody tallying each actual counting agent?
Right, I'll turn my camera back on because I'm sure you don't want to look at my arm anymore. There we go. So in ideal worlds, yes, you would want one person per counting agent in front of you. Sometimes that isn't always practical, so you may have to do two at once. And so if that's the case, make sure that it is usually the same box that they're counting and unfolding. So you may have to look at two. But it depends on how many people you've got.
I know for our local authority this year, they're only allowing one other person.
Yeah, and that's why
per ward.
A lot are, yes. And that's why it's really important that the people you do take as the candidates' guests are not just candidates' guests. Yeah. And also, I've done a deal locally with the Monster Raving Lunar Party. They've got 13 candidates in my by-election, and they're not taking anyone. So I've nabbed all their spare places.
Very good.
So if you've got any independents or people like the Monster Raving Loonies who are not actually going to take the count that seriously, do approach them and say, look, can we put some of ours down on your list? And a lot of people will do that.
So on the tally, are people only noting green votes, or is it helpful to try to tally other parties?
All of them, all the other parties, because you want to know if you're fighting a ward and say you don't win this time and say it's a Labour ward, you want to know which polling districts are strong for Labour and which are stronger for you. That is really important information. Or if it's a tight thing between you and the Lib Dems, you want to know where they're strongest and where you're weakest. So count all of the votes. Now, I haven't done multiple candidates on here because quite simply it would have been impossible to do. It isn't ideal doing it this way, but what I would recommend is that with your teams, you actually have a practice yourself. Mock up some ballot papers. I can give you a link if you want to be able to mock up some. You can send that out if anyone wants that, and do it yourselves and have a practice with your teams and practice doing the tallies as well.
There's a definite yes to a link to be able to print some of those.
Yeah, Ian, I haven't got it available now, so I can't share it at the moment. But what I can do, I can get the list from Emma of everyone that's subscribed and make sure you get a copy.
And I don't know, so can counting agents from other wards be assigned to count your target ward, or do they have to be the ward they're an agent for?
No, counting agents can do any ward. You'll often, what you'll find through the day is that you might have wards that you're not at all interested in. So you might put a counting agent but assign it to the target ward. So yeah, the agents will be assigning people throughout the day and moving them, because they won't all be the same. Oh wait, right, we have a results, Andy. Right, so not bad, Andy. We've got Labour was 22, the Greens were 18, Conservatives were 9, Lib Dems 6, and then the others were 5 between them, apparently. So not bad. Well done.
Can I just with that last question, Sharon, on counting agents for specific wards, it's hard to interpret, but we think our local authority this time is going to stop that, and they're actually going to only let the counting agent associated with each ward go to that table.
Oh, that's going to be quite difficult.
Yeah,
I imagine in the heat
They're going
of
to
the
have to
day,
have bouncers on.
yeah, that is going to be really hard, because you're just going to have a badge and you could always swap badges. But again, that is why it's really important that your candidate's guest is not a guest. Isn't there to support the candidate and, you know, swan around the room. Your candidate's guest, I would have as you treat them as a counting agent.
Okay, that's everything.
Yeah, so it's really, the COVID restrictions obviously are going to affect everything. I would say that's going to be really tough. Everyone is going to struggle. All of the parties are going to struggle, because you have to legally have someone, you've got a right to see those. But if you've just got one person, then how can they cover all of those stations? You might have 4 people doing, you know, one ward. You might have 6. You can't, one person can't keep an eye on them all, is what I would say. Right, so shall we move on? Because I can really smell that Chinese, and it's so I'm just going to share screen again and go back to the presentation, if that's all right with everyone. So we've had a little practice. As I said, it wasn't an ideal way of doing it, but I hope it was useful still. Did everyone find that useful? Yeah, good. So we've done the questions. So should we move to the actual count then? Okay. So in the actual count, again, I've done a similar sort of flow chart to give you an idea. Now, just remember that, you know, not all verifications will be completed by the time some wards start doing counts. So you will find things happening concurrently. You will, and also you will, everything happens at a different speed. So the first thing they'll do is they will take those ballot boxes, which are now full of the votes that have been verified, and they will scatter them, and they'll split them across several desks, because by law they have to have a mixture of at least 2 ballot boxes on each station, and they will also have to mix up the postal votes. And so what they'll do, they'll come along with a ballot box, sprinkle some on one table, some on another, and that's how that all gets mixed up. Then what they'll start to do is start to sort the ballots, and they'll place them in, well, I'm going to say trays. Most places have trays. Some places have piles rather than trays. But I'm just going to use the word trays. What I would say, if you've got piles, as they're using piles, not got piles, if they're using piles rather than baskets, one of the other roles of the counting agent is to make sure that that pile is not spilling and merging with another one, because that can really mess up your votes. So they will sort it, place those ballots for individual candidates into the respective trays and piles. At that point, our job is to make sure that no green ballots are added into other candidates' trays. You don't need to look at your tray at this point, because I actually don't care if a stray Labour vote goes in my green tray. That's for the Labour agent to worry about. What I'm worried about is none of my green votes end up in the Labour or the Conservatives tray. I want all my ballots to go in the green tray. So don't worry too much what's going on with your own tray. That is for the other agents to worry about. Quite like it if they shoved a few in by mistake. So then some of you will have multi-member wards, and to give you an idea how that works in a multi-member ward, they'll take all the full slate candidates. So where they take, for example, you've got 3 candidates, all 3 votes are for one party. They will take those and they will put them in trays for that party. The split ballots, where they've, I don't know, voted 2 Labour, 1 Green, they will put those to one side and do those later, but they'll concentrate on the full slate ballots first and divide those into the parties. In multi-member wards, make sure that the full slates are placed in your party's tray. And also, I would also make sure that they're not split. So you might get a counting agent, doesn't spot, thinks it's a multi-member, thinks it's a full slate for, I don't know, the Lib Dems, but there's 1 green vote on there and they haven't spotted it. So keep an eye out for that as well. And if you see them trying to put a full slate ballot into the wrong tray, or you see them trying to take one that's actually a split ballot and they've not spotted, highlight it, challenge it all the time. This is also the point where you can challenge to have spoiled papers and doubtful ballots taken to one side, and this is the point where you would do that. So once they've won, and then what they'll do once they've started sorting, and they will sort and count sometimes at the same time, then they'll start counting the ballot papers from the trays and into bundles. The bundles can vary from, the bundle size can vary from local authority to local authority, but within your count, the bundle size will all be the same. It could be 25, it could be 50, it could be 100. You can check that. You need to double check that it's got the right number of ballots in those bundles. So when they're counting, for example, you don't want to see a Green Party bundle that's supposed to be 100, but it's actually got 101 votes, because that one vote now will be lost. And if you come down to one vote, and for a recount, then that one's gone. In the same respect, you don't want them to be counting a bundle of Labour votes that's supposed to be 100, and there's only, I don't know, 98 in there. So double check the figures. If you're not happy, if you don't think it's right, challenge. If the baskets get full and are too full and ballots start to spill out and merge into other ones, demand a new basket. So no, I want a new tray. If you start to get a bit muddledy, then ask for that count to be stopped, get the returning officer and say, look, we need to sort this out. You have that right to do that. You don't want those different parties' ballot papers merging and getting all squishy, which sometimes does happen. The multi-member wards, which are split ballots, again, where, say, they voted up 2 Labour, 1 Green, what they would do, they would, once they've counted all of the full slate ballots, they will then start looking at the split ballots. And they'll do something, they'll put them on, typically what they're doing at the moment is using something called grass skirts, they've got like a big sticky tape at the top, and then the candidate's name in the same order it is on the ballot paper and the same distance on one side, and they stick each of the split ballots 1, 2, 3, 4 overlaying, so you can just see the ticks. And then they'll tally up each line and count the numbers of each line and give a number at the end, say 23 Greens, 47 Labour, and it will go all the way down. What you should be doing at that point is making sure that they're counting those numbers correctly, and keep double checking count the actual ticks yourself to make sure that you've got the right number of votes on those split ballots. Generally, most elections will be decided by the full slates rather than going down into split ballots. But sometimes it can come down to that if you've got you've really got a tight election. So possible things to watch, but we've already said, split ballots going into full slate baskets, your votes going into another party's baskets, no. Incorrect number of ballots being counted into bundles, single vote for a party, e.g. Labour, being placed on top of a bundle of another party's votes, for example, the Green, and that would turn an entire bundle red rather than green. So what can happen? You could have 99 Green votes, someone accidentally placed the Labour one on top of it, you put a band or a bulldog clip over, all of a sudden that pile of 99 Green votes has become a Labour bundle. So that has happened before, so do keep an eagle eye out. Eagle eyes are an advantage at this point. Everyone starts to get tired around this point, but you've just got to dig deep and keep going. Remember, be confident and challenge the count staff if you suspect a mistake has happened. Everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes. You are specifically there to observe the count and make sure it's done fairly and transparently, and that the result is reflective of what's actually been the ballots cast. We've kind of talked about grass skirts. Another way that they do it is sometimes they have tally sheets where they just tick and do, like a 5-mile gate tally of them. That's another way of doing it. In all of these situations, you need to be careful, you need to concentrate, and you need to pay attention and make sure the figures add up. As I said, everyone's tired when they start getting to split ballots, and that's where you can get mistakes. So once they've done that, and once they're confident that they've got some kind of result, they'll move to what we call the verbal declaration. They'll gather all the agents together. The agents will be asked to determine the doubtful ballots, and there is some really good guidance on the Electoral Commission website on how to decide doubtful ballots, and it's worth agents reading that and sub-agents. So they'll decide all of those, and then they will, when they think they've got a final figure, which the returning officer thinks is accurate, they will call all the agents together and give you what they call a verbal declaration. At that point, they will say, yeah, well, we've got 2,970 votes cast, and this is the result. Now, take a minute. Agents, you need time to actually digest, and by law, they have to give you time to sense check that number. If you don't think it's right, that's when you challenge. If one of your wards is really close, that's where we'll challenge. We'll do a little bit on recounts in a minute, but this is your opportunity to challenge anything. Once the formal decision has taken place and it goes to a formal declaration, it can only be changed by a judge. It's too late to challenge it. So make sure you sense check it. I've put in there a link to a newspaper article where there was one council where in the verbal declaration, they told, so there was 2,977 ballots were cast, but for some reason, all of the Tory candidates got 3,000 votes. But because no one spotted it because they were tired and they didn't really pay any attention, that went through to a formal declaration. And it's clearly, you know, the Tories got more votes than were cast, so it can't be right. But because nobody challenged it and it became a formal declaration, that was the result. And they had to take it to court afterwards to get that changed. So always pay attention, always check the figures, make sure they make sense. So recount. So what do you do if it is tight? What if you think it's, you know, you get down, I don't know, 15 votes between you and the other candidate. So what about a recount? Recounts, there's two types, something called a bundle check. A bundle check is where they'll count the number of bundles to make sure that adds up, and then the spare ones. They will also flick through the bundles to make sure that all of the votes are for that party. Or there is a full recount. They will only do full recounts if they have to. So if you want a full recount, you will have to push for it. So someone did ask me about when can you ask for a recount. Now, the law says that a returning officer has to agree to a recount, and it says that it's for them to determine what the reasonable request is. So they must give a recount if it's to grant a reasonable request, but they decide what's reasonable. Most returning officers will, in part of the candidates' meetings, will say, I will do recounts for, you know, a tolerance of, I don't know, 20 votes or something. And it will, obviously, it depends how big your ward is. If your ward's massive, then what's reasonable is much bigger than if it's a tiny ward. But I would say if it comes down to less than 50 votes, I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask for a bundle check. If it comes down to less than 20 votes, perfectly reasonable to get a full recount. The other thing which I would advise is if you are looking to get a recount of any kind at that stage, speak to the other agents and get them on board as well, because the returning officer is more likely to grant you a full recount if the other agents are lobbying for it at the same time. So I would sort of make sure you know the other agents, say hi, and if you want a recount, go up to, obviously not the person that's sort of winning by 10 votes, but the other parties, and go, look, I really want a recount, will you support me on it? And it will just make it easier to get one. I've already covered the thing about bundle checks. So they'll randomly count, they'll count all the bundles to make sure that it adds up to that number of votes. They'll flick through them and just to make sure it's all that, and they'll do that in front of you, and you need to be looking and making sure. As we've said, mistakes do happen. So your role is to make sure all votes in the bundle are for the correct candidates. Obviously, if it favours you, don't say anything, and ensure that the split ballots and totals are correct if it's a multi-member ward. Full recounts. If you have a full recount and it's close and it's your candidate, you want as many eyes around that table as you can get away with. So your role is to get as many of your counting agents around the table with everybody else's counting agents, and use your most experienced counting agents, the ones that are, you know, the ones that really have got good attention to details and eagle eyes, because generally within any count there are mistakes in every ward. You just don't spot them until it comes to a recount. So you line up your counting agent with each. I would have one counting agent in front of one counting member of staff, and they have to be very eagle-eyed and watch each ballot paper and ensure your votes go in the right basket. double check, triple check the arithmetic on split ballots. I don't think I spelled arithmetic there correctly, so excuse me. And if they are using grass skirts, make sure they're lined up properly. So now is the time for being ultra attention to detail. You can, if you're still not happy, you can request another recount. So if it's really, really close, you might want to do that. So that's entirely up to you. So once you've agreed that, what do we do now? We move to, the declaration. And this is basically, it's all over by this point. So they will, once all the agents have agreed they're happy with the verbal declaration, you will then move to this final stage. Returning officer will announce the result. It can be on a stage, it doesn't have to be, it can just be over a PA system. But once that it's formally declared, you cannot request a recount. And so you need to be doubly sure, because this does happen. The returning officer will want everyone to get home as early as possible. They will say things like, everyone's a bit tired now, why don't we come back to this in the morning and try and get a declaration? Don't believe them. You can only a judge can ask for a formal declaration to be overturned. So if they try to do it and you're still not sure, push back and go, no, I'm still not sure that is an accurate result. And I can't stress that enough, because it does happen. So what I would say, if you've got any questions, and do get in contact with field agents across the country. Here we go. Here's the names of everyone. So please do get in contact with them. My other thing is, please, I would have a practice with tallying and involve the people that are going to be at the count and get them ready for it as well. I think it's really valuable to do that. So I'm just going to stop sharing. Hello, everyone. I can actually see people again now. So yes, so can I just say, is there any questions? Sort of, we're kind of at the end, but people might have a lot more questions about the actual count itself and anything about recount. So is there anything anyone wants to ask?
I've got a couple that have come in as well. So at the declaration point, is it automatic that they will have, I'm sort of interpreting this, is it automatic that they will have checked that the number counted matches the verification?
Generally, yeah, most counts are run really efficiently, and generally they will, but mistakes do happen. So if you don't think it's right, if you're not confident, then that's your opportunity, the verbal declaration. There has been known that when it comes to formal declaration, the returning officer makes a mistake and reads out the wrong numbers. So if they do something really silly like that, they can, as long as they're still speaking and it hasn't ended, they can correct it. So if he suddenly, so if the returning officer, he or she, turns around and says 5,400 for the Conservative candidate, and it was actually 540, could happen, then turn around and just at that point go, no, it's wrong. And they can, at that point, if they've made an error in just how they say something, they can correct that, but they have to do it before. They can't go off, finish declaration, come back again. Cool. Does that answer that one?
I think it does. Andy's putting his thumb up, yeah. Or both thumbs. And then verifying the count, can a sub-agent attend that and agree it, or is it only an agent?
No, but a sub-agent can do it. A sub-agent can do everything an actual agent can do, but they have to be nominated by the agent. So you would have, it's always worthwhile nominating a sub-agent to go instead of you if you can't go.
Okay. In terms of the postal votes, can you see where they've come from in the ward? As in, do they have a polling station code, or are they just all lumped together?
No, they'll do one. Basically, they will put them into ballot boxes in the same way that you would. So they will be by ward, but I don't know if they're, I'm trying to think whether, I don't think they're done by polling district, but I think they're just ward.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, that's all the questions.
Oh, right. Oh, God, that wasn't too many. Is there anything that I've not covered that anyone wanted me to cover? No? Okay. Okay, I was during. I was going to play my favourite Blackadder clip about the what's it called, dish and dishonesty, where they have like the election. I was going to play that clip where they're doing the declaration, and suddenly one candidate could apparently you've got 1,751 votes, but I won't do that. But I would urge anybody who's interested in politics to watch that Blackadder, dish and dishonesty. It's really funny. Danny, your hand was up. Was it still up or?
No, it's fine.
No, it's fine. Right. Okay. This final. Anything else that you need? Anything else I can help you with?
So there's another couple of questions come
Good.
in, Sharon. Quick explanation again, terminology-wise, counting agents.
Yep. Counting agents are the people that local parties nominate to count to watch the vote being counted. So they are volunteers. They are the people that we take to the count. Counting staff are the people who are paid to physically count the votes and open the ballot boxes. They're paid members and staff, usually work for your local authority.
And any general advice about keeping track of ballot boxes?
Who asked the question? Can it be a bit more specific?
Tom, over to you, Tom.
Hi, Tom. I just want to understand a bit more about what you mean.
Sorry, yeah, it's just a case of I know when I was at the count before, it's very difficult to sort of keep track of where they're taking the boxes, and especially when you're trying to keep track of multiple polling districts at the same time. I just wondered if there was any general advice that you had in terms of
make sure you've got counting agents in front of every table. Make sure they know to ask what the number of the ballot box is. When you first go in the count, they're supposed to give you a list of ballot box numbers and how that corresponds to your polling district. So it will say, polling district EA, ballot box number 59 and 58. So if you're wanting to be sort of just look at some of them, then you follow those, but you have to physically follow them around. Sometimes they will, if it's wards, they normally indicate where the wards are. So you'll have something going, St. Mark's ward, these tables over here are Berrylands wards, and they'll have like actual sort of signs. Normally
wards have multiple polling districts per ward.
Yes, but
so that's where all the confusion usually arises when we're trying to identify which part of the ward.
Well, what they will do is on that sheet that I was explaining, it will list all of the polling districts. So if you've got a ward with 3, it will list all 3, and it will tell you which ballot box numbers relate to that individual polling district. So again, it's just getting that habit. And when you get there, if you're going to be the agent, you're running it, get there, ask for that piece of paper. If they don't give it you, you have a right to it.
Great, thank you.
Everyone else?
Yeah, nothing else in the chat.
Awesome. I can go and get my Chinese in a minute then. As I said, do ask your field agents if you've got any, more specific questions. The COVID restrictions are going to make it slightly different, and until we actually get in the room, it's hard to know exactly how it's going to affect it. So I would say be nimble, and I would do, as I said, just make sure that use your candidate guest as a full agent, get them there as a counting agent, train them. If your candidate isn't too nervous, make sure they're trained as well. But candidates tend to just be a bit overly up. I've done it myself, so I've been a candidate and tried to be a counting agent, and I find it really hard because it's also personal. So, but if you think you can use them to do counting, be a counting agent, then do that. So I think we've put in there the feedback form. So if you wouldn't mind, or what was it? Please do circulate the key links. I'll make sure they all get sent out to everybody that enrolled, and I will also attach in there a copy of a fake ballot paper so that you can print them off and have a practice with your teams. It's definitely worth doing. Generally, if I was doing it face to face with the team, I would make everyone do it until they got the right figures, but I'm horrible. So sorry. I feel sorry for the London party sometimes. That's that horrible. So yeah, but I would do that. So it's worth doing. It really is. So I try, yeah, and I know. Thank you for that, Natalie. It's not easy, is it? Trying to do it with a camera. But thank you for your patience, everyone. And and thanks for turning up. And we're all here. If you've got any questions, we're all here to help you. All right. And thank you, Tom, who was brilliant, by the way. And can I just say, I'm really relieved that was the first national training thing I've given. So I was been nervous all day. So thank you. Oh, right. Okay, well, I'll let you all go. But please do practice at home with your teams and we'll see you all soon. Good luck at the count, everyone. And Danny, I'll give you a call and we'll go through separately together. We'll go through it together, okay? Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, Sharon, I forgot to ask them. Can I just ask a last minute question?
Of course you can.
Right, we have a borough mayoral election that uses supplementary vote.
Yes.
So how does that affect the count? Does that?
I don't know if I would like to come back to you. I do not feel suitably prepared to give you a cast iron answer. So what I'll actually do, Ian, can you give me your email address? I'll stick it in a private message if you don't want everyone to know it, and I will come back to you individually. If there's any individual questions like that, I'd rather just make sure we get them right.
Sorry, Sharon, I've got a last minute question as well. Sorry, I didn't think of it earlier. Our ballot boxes are going to have 3 different ballot papers in them. So how does that affect the verification? Do they verify them all at the same time, just separate them into piles? How does that work?
I'm surprised.
Or do they go into different ballot boxes to start with? I don't know. We've got boroughs, counties, and
they were going
PCC.
to different ballot boxes, I think, or they were.
Okay.
But
So
again,
that should be
Andy,
straightforward
can
then.
you give me your if you give me your email address, let me clarify it, or pop your number in, and I'll give you a call once I've managed to get a definitive answer, because I don't want to give the wrong answer.
I give an answer from past experience.
Can
General election. So they put them in the same ballot box. They waste an hour at the verification separating them, and then they verify whichever one they're counting first. So in general election, it'd be they do it in first, and then they save the council election. I don't know whether they verify the other one before counting it or after they verified the other one. So I don't know that much detail.
Thanks, Jake.
Brilliant, thank you. That's absolutely fine. I've lost my pen. If someone, I'm just getting a note for pen so I can write down these email addresses. But what we'll do, Andy, is I'll actually get someone to come back with the real answer, because my elections are normally a bit more straightforward than that, thank God. So yes. And is anybody else got anything individual that they want coming back on, and I'll make a note of everyone's email addresses.